video, and as always I forgot to turn the something off before I come on, but I've done it now, so good. And today I'm going to talk about Soviet misinformation and the way this misinformation continues to be used by the inheritors of the Soviet Empire in Moscow today. I'm going to talk about Rudolf Hess and the escape, his so-called peace mission, and to sort of try and put this into context. The Second World War was started as a result of a conspiracy, let's say, by two countries. The first country, obviously Nazi Germany, and the second country was the Soviet Union. On the 26th of August 1939, the foreign ministers of these two countries got together and they signed an agreement called the Molotov-Ribbentrop Pact. The Nazi foreign minister went all the way to Moscow, and there he met not only Molotov but also Stalin and all the other Soviet hierarchy, and they came up with this agreement to start the Second World War. On the 1st September 1939, Nazi Germany invaded Poland, followed by the 17th of September, the Soviet Union invaded Poland as well. As a result of the Nazi German invasion on the 1st, then Britain and France declared war on Nazi Germany, as the agreement to Poland only affected an invasion by Nazi Germany. Then it didn't, neither of these countries had to declare war on the Soviet Union, but of course the Soviet Union didn't actually know that, right? So I suspect they didn't know that. So the Soviet Union was quite prepared at that moment to go to war with the United Kingdom and France. During the period of this pact, and I would call it an alliance, although there are those who argue it wasn't, the Soviet Union invaded Finland, it invaded Estonia, Latvia, Lithuania. It took a very large chunk of Romania as well. So 6 countries invaded as a result of this pact. And just to give an idea of what this meant for the population in these countries, in Estonia, more than 2% of the population was deported within the first year of the Soviet occupation. This was followed by a massive influx of peoples from ethnic Russians, which occupied these areas, and this has left a situation today where in Estonia it could be as many as 40% of the population are actually Russian speakers. So it's often portrayed that the Soviet Union was the friend of Britain and the United States. We must never forget that. It was the Soviet sacrifice, but the sacrifice was made by the peoples of the Soviet Union. It wasn't made by the Soviet leadership. In any way, no one in the Soviet leadership was as much as hurt during the Second World War that I can think of. And so it's the sacrifice. It was a sacrifice made by others in the names of those at the top. So to make this even worse, though, in the follow-up meetings that were held, Stalin made it quite clear that he was prepared to declare war on the United Kingdom should it be necessary. In November of 1940, Molotov went to Berlin. There he met Hitler, amongst others. His first meeting on the first day was with Hitler, and Molotov made his requests, shall we say, as to what territories they'd like to take over, sort of dividing up the world between themselves into two separate spheres. And as far as Hitler later said in June of 1942, when he was in Finland, there is a recording that was made. It's the only recording, said to be the only recording of his normal voice ever made, and you can hear him speaking to Mannerheim, and he says, the Finnish leader, and he said it was the fact that Molotov went to Berlin, and in that moment he saw the ridiculous demands that the Soviets were making, and therefore he decided he had to go to war with them. That's what he said, but I think he'd actually made his mind up before then. Indeed, he'd spoken to Keitel in just after the fall of France. But whatever, there can be no doubt that the Soviet Union wanted to to attack, or was prepared, shall we say, to attack the United Kingdom. It is part of its imperialist aims. Now, to so it might sound as though I'm talking about something else now, but in May of 1941, Rudolf Hess, Hitler's deputy, decides he's going to go off to the United Kingdom and to have peace talks. And one thing which has been consistently said by the Soviets and then now by Russians is that, oh, this just goes to prove that Nazi Germany and Britain was in league against the Soviet Union. I mean, utterly twisted argument, but this twisted argument, they've gone at great lengths to try to actually reinforce. Now, what we know about the flight of Hess is that I think we'll be pretty certain that Hitler didn't actually know about it. That's why I suspect he didn't know about it. I mean, we can't say it for certain. Heinz Linger, who was his valet, he said he thought deep down that Hitler had actually got Hess to do it for him. But I don't. I think that's I think that's just something that was said afterwards. It needs to be pointed out, of course, that Hitler never actually talked to Linger about things of this nature. Anyway, sorry, I had to move the camera because I heard there was a noise there coming from my computer. Both Ernst Wilhelm Böhler, who was head of the Nazi Party's foreign organization, and Hermann Goering's adjutant, who were Bodenschatz, who were at the Obersalzberg at the time that Hitler learned, they also got the impression that Hitler knew about the flight. Now, what we normally, though, would think of the news as Albert Speer's reaction is that he'd come to see Hitler. He had a few pictures. He was waiting to some drawings. He was waiting to go in to see him, and he heard this animal-like shriek and this demand for Bormann that Hitler had gone absolutely berserk. Having said that, Hitler was known to throw on theatricals when it could benefit him, so maybe he did actually know. Now, the Hess had an adjutant. He had two adjutants who went to see Hitler on that day. One of them was called Friedrich Alexander Karl-Heinz Pinch. He was born on 3rd of June 1909 in Berlin. He was an early Nazi, joined in the 1920s, and it was around 1933 that Hess chose him to be his personal adjutant, and that came with a post which was Sturmbannführer, so it's like a major more or less. And but Hess is rather difficult to understand how he ended up in having such a high position in the Nazi hierarchy. He was with Hitler at the very beginning in the early 1920s. He didn't take part in the putsch, or did he? Hang on, sorry, I've forgotten. No, sorry, I changed that back. He did take part in the putsch. He didn't know about the putsch, but he was one of those who was assigned to arrest people in the Bavarian government, as it was. He managed to escape after it, and when the other putschists got extremely light prison sentences, and he somehow found out that if he handed himself in, he'd also get a light prison sentence. But if he hung around, he didn't, and then he got arrested later, he could even face the death penalty. He handed himself in May 1924. So Hitler had been condemned on the first, got prison sentence on the sentence, I should say, 1st of April 1924. So Hess went along about 5 weeks later, and then he ended up in prison with Hitler. Now, whilst he was in there, it's often said he became Hitler's secretary. He wasn't actually Hitler's secretary as such. What Hitler would do, he was writing a book, and I think everybody else was quite bored by it, but except for Hess, and Hitler would read it to Hess, and Hess would then sort of make his comments on it. But we do know that Hitler was the one who was writing it up, because he was the one with the typewriter typing it up, not Hess. So Hess stayed with Hitler throughout the period of struggle, so to speak. But I think he was, even by the early 1930s, he was started to be sidelined. Hitler was sort of, maybe to show a bit of gratefulness, made him the deputy Führer in 1933, but that was a post that didn't carry much weight. Now, Hess was one of those who sort of laid the groundwork of the Holocaust. He was one of the those who very much involved in the anti-Jewish legislation, for example. But Goering said at Nuremberg, or when in his interrogation, he said that the thing was this, is that Hess, who'd been very much with Hitler in the 1930s, is that in 1920s, by the 1930s, Hitler had enough of him. And whereas Hitler, I think it had said he could talk to many people and he felt good afterwards. He couldn't talk, speaking to Hess for 5 minutes and he had a headache. He just didn't want to have anything to do with him. And the positions that he had didn't carry much weight with them. So when Hess went off on his peace mission, this was as though he was trying to put himself in the limelight again. Hitler wasn't really interested in domestic affairs very much. He was interested in things related to the military and in foreign policy, nothing else. And Hess's positions were involved with the home policy. So why Hess would be, why he didn't have any reason to see Hess whatsoever. So now, Hess had been a pilot in the First World War, and he was simply quite proud of this. He did have an argument in Landsberg with Hitler about what kind of plane was the best, something about engineering of planes. I don't know why Hitler should think he knew anything about it, but he did choose to pick an argument with Hess on this subject. And anyway, so they did find a guard who had also been a pilot, and so it maybe settled this argument. Now, Hess thought he continued doing training flights, and he started doing this in October of 1940. And so by this time, he's in his, he'd be about 47 by then. And he also got a Bf 110 from Messerschmitt's chief test pilot Wilhelm Stohr, and sometimes his adjutant Pinch would actually accompany him. Now, on the 10th of January 1941, Pinch went to his home, collected him, and took him to Messerschmitt's factory airfield in Augsburg. Then Hess was getting into the plane, but as he did it, he gave Pinch 2 letters. One was addressed to Hitler and had sealed instructions that the letter was only to be opened within 4 hours if he didn't actually return. Now, Hess flew off. But the weather wasn't very good. I think that's what you can expect in January. And then in 2 hours later, he came back. However, nonetheless, Pinch had ignored the instructions. He'd read the letter. And that's how he found out in January that Hess intended to fly to the United Kingdom. Not only that, somebody actually typed up the letters. He hadn't done it himself, and that was his secretary, Laura Schödel. And not only that, then Pinch tried, I think, to persuade Hess not to do this, but he didn't want to do it himself. But he went to one of his Hess's friends. It was Max Hofweber. Max and Rudolf had been flying buddies during the First World War. And not only that, then Hofweber also thinking was a good idea, but not being the one to want to try and persuade Hess not to do it. He told Professor Haushofer, and Haushofer then went to see Hess. Now, he didn't actually put it in so many words, don't go flying off the United Kingdom, because he'd have to break a confidence. But what he did, he told him about the dream he'd had where it was rivers of blood or something like this. It's trying to give him the idea that this would be a dreadful idea, but it seems as though Hess interpreted this dream in a different way and just persuaded him more to actually do this. So he had to fly off to the United Kingdom to get Britain to agree to peace. Now, on Saturday, the 10th of May, 1941, Rudolf Hess said goodbye to his wife, didn't say where he was going, except he did mention he might be gone for a very long time. He got in his car, a Mercedes, and he took with him Karl-Heinz Pinch, his manservant Josef Palzer, and Franz Lutz, who was a policeman, and his bodyguard. And they went to a place called Hounstetten Airfield, which is just outside of Augsburg. Now, today, I went there. It's part of where the university is in Augsburg, but the southern bit of it is a very nice park and with a lake. And so I thought, I didn't film it when I was there. I just sort of walked around it. And anyway, so once more, Hess handed Pinch the letters and that needed to be delivered. Now, there's a photograph where you see Hess is getting in his plane and he's about to fly away. But this photograph was taken in January 1941. It's usually said it was May 1941, but it wasn't. It was January 41. Pinch wanted to take a photograph of Hess, but Hess didn't allow it. He thought it would be bad luck and it might make the weather bad. Now, Hess believed in these sort of things like omens, and he was into all sorts of weird stuff. Now, he believed in sort of not so much even traditional medicines, but even believed in things like magic medicines, and that is taking it one further. I mean, for example, I believe in homeopathy as much as possible, but I do realize that, I mean, if a tiger bites your leg off, you can eat all the spinach in the world, but your leg's not going to grow. I accept the fact there are times when pharmaceutical intervention would be useful. Hess wasn't like that. Indeed, even he used to have his own food made because it had certain bio properties, and Hitler eventually, he would take it on to Hitler's place and he'd ask the cook to heat it up, and then Hitler told him, well, I'm sure the cook can actually do whatever you want. He said, no, I must bring it myself because it's got to be grown a particular way. And then Hitler said, well, in that case, you can just eat your food by yourself somewhere else, but don't bring it around here. Hess then flew off, and he was, I mean, it seems a bit daft, actually. If you look at a map from Augsburg, he's got to fly over nearly all of Germany before even reaching the sea. Why didn't he fly off from somewhere like Hamburg or somewhere like that? Was a bit closer. That would seem to be more logical. The plane did have to have additional fuel to be put into it, which in itself, I suspect, was rather difficult to get a hold of. Now, on that day, around 21:45, Pinch decided that he had to go and see Hitler. So then he made arrangements the following day to go down to Obersalzberg by train with the message. And now, anyway, so they get to Obersalzberg. There's they said they have an urgent message for Hitler. Albert Speer was already there. They asked Albert Speer if he wouldn't mind waiting a little bit. They took the message. Hitler went berserk, and that day, Pinch and the other adjutant, Alfred Leitgen, were kicked out of the Nazi Party. They were arrested. Bormann took over, and they were interrogated, probably in an unpleasant way as well. Pinch told the Gestapo everything he knew, and then both he and Leitgen were sent off to Sachsenhausen concentration camp. Not only that, the secretary typed up the letters. She was considered to be in on the plot, so she went off to Sachsenhausen. The manservant, who was over 60 by this time, he was arrested. The bodyguard Lutz, he was arrested, and also arrested a number of other people. Sorry, I said the manservant was over 60. It wasn't. It was Ernst Schulte Strathaus was over 60. He was one of the staff members of Hess. So anyway, Bormann, despite the fact that Hess is being his boss, he was a social climber, and now he realized his chance. Bormann had been in the background. He'd done just about all of Hess's work for him over the past few years, and so therefore Bormann wanted the People's Court to try those who were involved on it. Now, on the 14th of May, 1941, Goebbels wrote in his diary that he was going to Ainring by plane. That's the local plane, which is called airfield close to Obersalzberg. And so work at full stretch during the journey. The Führer's waiting for me. I read the letter that Hess left behind for the Führer, totally confused. Schoolboy amateurism, saying that he intended to go to England, make this hopelessness of the position clear to them, bring down Churchill's government with the aid of Lord Hamilton in Scotland, and then make a peace which would save London's face. Now, so that's what Goebbels thought, and that was pretty ridiculous to absolutely everybody there. Now, as far as Hess was concerned, he did find out what had happened to all of his staff members, and he wrote them a letter to say how sorry he was for the problems that he'd caused. Now, there is a problem though, and that is with the need to know, which is a normal thing in any military or intelligence gathering organization. Pinch knew, but he didn't tell Bormann, and didn't tell Bormann for a very good reason, because Bormann didn't need to know. So therefore, it put him in a really difficult position. Why didn't you tell us? Well, I thought it was a secret. Hess is Hitler's deputy, so I just assumed that he was doing what Hitler wanted. I didn't know what the contents of the letter were, etc., or something like that. Now, the thing was, though, as far as Pinch was concerned, it now put him in a really difficult situation. He was now in a concentration camp, and in Sachsenhausen, it can't have been terribly pleasant. He was there for 3 years, and in 1944 they needed officers, and he was taken out of Sachsenhausen. He was put in the Wehrmacht. He was promoted to lieutenant, or I don't know if promoted is the right word. He was, because he had been a sort of a major earlier, and he was sent off the Eastern Front, and he was captured in no time at all. And so now, when the Soviet intelligence found out who he was, and they found out quite quickly, he was handed over to the NKVD for questioning. And not only that, though, because the NKVD, by this time of the war, had they had a line that they wanted to stick to. It was Hess had flown off the United Kingdom to get the United Kingdom to join the Nazi Germany in war against the Soviet Union, which remains sort of the official sort of line from the Kremlin today, even though it's totally ridiculous. But now that they had Hess's adjutant in their hands, they had to get him to confess, and to do that, they tortured him. I tortured him so badly that he said he couldn't use a spoon to eat with. His hands were so. I don't know what they did to do that. Well, I can imagine one or two things, but the aim clearly was to get him to confess, or to tell them what they wanted to hear. In 2010, only 15 years ago, a 28-page notebook from 1948 was discovered in the Moscow Special Archives by Mateusz Uhl. He works in the German Historical Institute. He worked in the German Historical Institute in Moscow, and it was in Pinch's handwriting. Now, here Pinch wrote that Hitler knew about Hess's flight plans in advance, and he said that Pinch said that Hitler reacted very calmly after reading Hitler's letter, and Hitler calmly listened to my report and dismissed me without comment. The Führer had known about Hess's flight for a while, the adjutant claimed, because Berlin had also been negotiating with London for some time. The flight was by prior arrangement with the British, and Hess's mission was to use all means at his disposal to achieve, if not a German military alliance with the United Kingdom against the Soviet Union, at least the neutralization of the United Kingdom. And copies of this were sent to Stalin, Molotov, and Beria. Now, this in this notebook was written by Pinch. I presume that this happened. They had to wait for his wounds under torture to actually heal before he could start writing again. So they might, if they'd done this 44, 45, 46, but it was written in 48. So they had plenty of time. The thing is like this, though, is they were stupid enough to use the same sort of language that was used in Soviet propaganda. And is using things like taking the chestnuts out of the fire, which is a very typical Soviet line. And so, I mean, if I ever appear on Russian television, for example, talking about taking chestnuts out of the fire, you'll know I've been forced to do it. And it's not my own words. And what is particularly bad about this, though, is that the Soviet Union was still theoretically allied to Britain and the United States. It was still in receipt of British and American war materials, and yet it was trying already to twist history in the same way as we can see, for example, in 1944, the refusal of the Soviets to assist the Poles. In fact, indeed, when the Poles Operation Storm Bourgeois, they in front of the Soviet lines, when they tried to actually liberate territory in Poland, how the Polish Home Army was arrested by the NKVD and others, and so ended up in gulags, all were murdered. So the Soviet Union itself was fighting this war against a theoretical ally, so it's Poland, effectively as from 1943, effectively when it broke off diplomatic relations with the West. So it's, to me, very, I don't know, it's this twisted idea that people keep bringing up today, that the Soviet Union was somehow the ally. It wasn't. It was a co-belligerent, but to say it was an ally of Britain and the United States, I think is Britain and the United States were allies of the Soviet Union, but it wasn't, but not the other way around. Put it that way. That would be my argument. The Soviet Union held on to its German prisoners for quite a long time, and certainly those who had the highest value were held on to the most. You've got the son of Himmler, or the adopted son, I should say, von Ache, who was held on until the very last transport was made in 1955. 16th of December 1955, Pinch was released and he made it back to Germany. He then went to live in Munich, and then he sort of he told a British journalist in '65 that Hess told him just before he left that the Führer doesn't know, so Hitler didn't know. Afterwards, Pinch hardly ever talked to anyone, though he didn't really want to actually. He didn't want to sort of recall it. He'd lost a great deal of his life, but there was attraction in his youth to the Nazis. Alfred Leitgen, the other adjutant who was arrested, did talk about his experience. He was a witness at Nuremberg, and he happily taught the Institute of Contemporary History in Munich, and there's a huge amount of stuff on his experiences and what actually happened to him as a result of his involvement with Hitler. Although, of course, he didn't have go through the torture that Pinch went through, and in order, effectively, the torture was done so that the Soviets could falsify history, and that falsification still goes on until today. Only yesterday, I saw a comment on some video going along the similar lines about what great sacrifices Russia made in the Second World War, which is nonsense. It was the Soviet Union. It was the people of the Soviet Union, but not those at the top. Okay, so I'll look at the comments now. Hello, Craig. Hello, Denny, Hugh, and Redemption watching from Spandau, Berlin. What are the odds? Yeah, that's really Spandau. The prison was knocked down, so when Hess died in August 1987, apparently the bulldozers were in within 12 hours. They must have had them on standby. Right, Senor asked me, do I think Hess committed suicide to end of his life, or maybe he was killed? I can't. Well, the thing is this. I think he killed himself. I mean, there were those that said he couldn't do it, but you've got the thing is this: if you only got one logical answer, then that is the most likely. I don't think there's any evidence that Hess was murdered. I just can't see the point. I mean, what could he do? I mean, he'd been in prison for 46 years, or locked up for 46 years. There's absolutely nothing he could have told anyone that wasn't already known, except maybe he had what it was like in the garden in Spandau. It is a bit suspicious, however. I've got to say this, is that they were spending at the time 30,000 Have I got the right sum here? 30,000. Can't remember. 30,000 something. I remember reading this in Newsweek. 30,000 something a month. I can't remember what the currency is, if it's pounds or dollars or whatever. And just to keep one person locked up, it just doesn't make any sense. The reason he wasn't released earlier was because of the Soviet Union. But by this time, Gorbachev was prepared to consider releasing him. This is where the conspiracy sort of comes in. It's that, okay. But why? What could he possibly have told anyone? I mean, if any, the only logic to this would be if it was maybe he was going to get released, and when he was released, he could say something that the Soviets wanted him to say. Or I mean, maybe there's that. I don't know. But he was frightened to say when he was in prison. But it just doesn't make any sense, because he would be a target anyway. In prison he had protection, which he didn't have when he was out. Anyway, that's yeah. Sorry, I can't remember what currency it was, but I read it in Newsweek, and that's 40 years ago. So or nearly 40 years ago. Anyway, at the time, I don't believe that Hess did anything other than kill himself. I do appreciate it is a bit odd though for somebody of that age to actually kill themselves. But you know, it could be this, and this I think stands to reason. He might be realizing that he's not going to live much longer. He doesn't want to suffer, and so he took his life. And from that point of view, I wouldn't actually condemn somebody. I could think I could maybe understand somebody in that position doing something like that. Having said that, he did have a history of trying to take his life. He had tried before. He tried in 1943 by throwing himself down the stairs, over the balcony, I should say. And so it wasn't. I think he did it a couple of other times as well. So it wasn't the first time. But at the end of the day, though, there were so many guards around, and the reason why he was kept there, the Soviets would never say that he could get released. It was nothing to do with Operation Barbarossa or anything like that. I think, but it was because, I mean, let's face it, they let other people out early. It was the fact that they gave them access to West Berlin, where Spandau was, so they could have. Drive around West Berlin every from time was it 3 months every year. Okay, that's it. So anyway, thanks very much for watching. This one was spurred by the oh, hang on, yeah, that's a good point. Anyway, no, sorry, this was spurred by that comment I saw yesterday. Hang on just a minute, I'll do David's here. Yeah, David says this is a good point, right? Maybe say something embarrassing like the British aristocracy was sympathetic to the Nazis. Yeah, I'll tell you a little story which I read about a month ago, if I can remember the exact details of it. There was, I think it might have been Lord Halifax on the 1st of September 1939, who got in. Sorry, the facts might be, I can't quite remember. He was given a lift by the Duke of Westminster. So he's the richest person in the United Kingdom, at least the present one is, I think, or maybe it's the Queen. But anyway, he was given a lift by the Duke of Westminster, and then the Duke of Westminster went off in his pro-Hitler speech during the lift, and saying how bad the Jews were and how right the Hitler was to get rid of them. And seeing as he was being given a lift, he kept his mouth shut. Whoever it was, maybe it was Halifax. And then Halifax told him when he got to the House of Parliament or wherever he was going, he said he gave him a mouthful and said he didn't want to speak to him again. So there were people, and Halifax is normally considered to be somebody who was more pro-Nazi. Yeah, the Duke of Hamilton didn't really know Hess, I don't think. I think when he landed, he said something like, yeah, he'd seen him perhaps at the Olympics in '36, but he doesn't really remember him very well, sort of thing. It wasn't as though they knew each other. I don't doubt that there may have been people within the aristocracy who were pro-Nazi, but I don't think it was all that common. I think that the aristocracy in Britain might have taken a similar line to that of taken by Hindenburg, that these Nazis were just a bunch of uneducated sort of working class people, and not the sort of people they normally hang around with. And so I think that is the attitude that they would have taken on the whole. I don't think this idea of the great peacemaker, which is sort of Putin's presented today by certain quarters, when they're attacking all of these countries. Anyway, yeah, that's how I see it. Anyway, good. Okay, well, thanks very much. Hello, David, and David too, I should say there. And good. I'll do something again tomorrow. I don't know what I'm going to do yet. I have done a video incidentally on Karl-Heinz Pinch, which I should leave a link to somewhere. And anyway, so I'll do for the next week or so. I can so I haven't got a lot on, so I can do this. And do one every day. So thanks for watching. All the best, and bye for now.